Our reviewer today, Hasso Hering, may be a familiar name to many of you. He was the editor of the Albany Democrat-Herald from 1978 until 2012, and for the last several of those years, his editorials appeared in the combined Sunday edition of the Democrat-Herald and Gazette-Times. They were always signed with his distinctive lowercase hh, just in case you remember that. Hasso worked at the Democrat-Herald for 35 years, 34 of them as the editor. My husband, Gary Whitehouse, had hoped to be here today to introduce Hasso, but he's not. He worked for Hasso at the DH for 5 years, and he says Hasso was the best editor he ever had because he never let a story go to print if one more question needed to be answered. Hasso was born in Germany. He was a high school exchange student in Southern California for a year, and 3 years later, at the age of 19, he emigrated to the United States. He attended San Fernando Valley State College, which is now Cal State Northridge. While he was there, he met Kathy Settle, another journalism student, whom he would marry less than 2 years later. He worked for the Van Nuys News as a copy boy and as a reporter. After graduating in 1967, he took a job with the Ashland Daily Tidings, where he worked until 1977 when he came to Albany. Hasso's wife, Kathy, is a retired Albany school administrator, and they have 2 grown sons. Hasso is an avid bicycle rider, and he continues to write about the goings-on in the Albany area on his website, which is at hh-today.com. You may hear more about that later. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Hasso Hering. Okay, let's try this on for size. Is that about right?
Just about right.
Okay.
Thank you very much for this exhaustive introduction.
Take it away.
We are here to talk about guess what, a book. Although it might be, that might not be exactly the right description, to be truthful about it. We'll get into that a little later. Am I talking loud enough for everybody here? Okay. Let me say, first of all, that as we talk about this book, I'd like this to be more of a conversation than somebody just holding forth. So if you have, I invite you to have questions, and I invite you to challenge what I say. And when you do that, please speak up. Now, as it turns out, I'm getting close to pretty deaf. So when I say speak up, I mean shout. Or if I can't hear you, I'm just going to have to come listen to you up close. The work we are talking about here is, as you can see on this wonderful screen, and that's another topic. This is the first time I've ever talked to anybody with this kind of a screen apparatus in front of me. So the chances are pretty good that something is gonna go wrong. So I'd just like you to beg your forbearance ahead of time. The book is called The Influencing Machine, and it is written by somebody named Brooke Gladstone. She is identified in public life as the producer and editor, I guess the managing editor of a national public radio program called On the Media. I must admit, right up front, I have never listened to that program. I'm not the best NPR customer at all, I'm sorry to say. I used to be a regular on All Things Considered when I drove home in the afternoon or late in the afternoon, and on Morning Edition when I drove to work the next morning. But then our newspaper, the Democrat Herald in Albany, made the mistake of becoming a morning paper, which meant that I didn't get to work until about 10:30 in the morning, and I didn't leave work until about 11:30 at night, which meant that all things considered in the afternoon and morning edition were off limits to me. So I haven't actually listened to those programs for a long time. And somebody told me that On the Media with Brooke Gladstone is on once a week on NPR, and that it is sometime in the afternoon, like 5 o'clock or thereabouts. I think most of us probably have other things to do, so let me just ask, anybody ever heard On the Media on NPR? Well, I congratulate you on being so well informed.
It's later in the evening. It's like 7 or 8, I think.
I'm sorry?
It's later in the evening. It's 7 or 8, I think.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'll keep that in mind. I'll try to take it in.
So it's also probably online as well.
I could, yeah, right. If I was adept at online stuff, I could do that. And in any case, what distinguishes this volume, this book, is that it is an illustrated book. And as you can see from the headline here, it is illustrated by somebody named Josh Neufeld, who I'm told, and I learned when I read the reviews of this thing, that he was famous for, he became well known, not to me though, became well known to the general public as the illustrator of a book about New Orleans after the Hurricane Katrina. Let me tell you a little bit about Brooke Gladstone. As I mentioned, she is the host of this program, or of On the Media, but she's also a longtime reporter starting, I think, in newspapers and then spending her time in the broadcast medium. She worked for NPR out of Moscow, and she was the first media reporter of the NPR program All Things Considered with Scott Simon, which is the one that I remember. Somebody mentioned here that as the years progress, she becomes ever more senior. So she became the senior producer and so on. Well, she's an accomplished person. She has won 2 Peabody Awards, a National Press Club Award, an Overseas Press Club Award, and many others. And as the writer of this blurb points out, you tend to accumulate some of these awards the longer you are in that field and the more assiduous you are in submitting to contests, which I never really like to do, which accounts for the paucity of awards in my life, I think, or lack of talent. That could be that. So she did write a few years ago this book, which came out in 2011. And it has received almost universal praise. Now, it turns out that this universal praise comes, as near as I can tell, entirely from other media people in New York or Washington. To me, that doesn't say any whole lot. I mean, it says what I just said, New York and Washington, but it also means that the critiques that are being publicized of this book come from the very same people who are involved in the same media circles as the author of this book. To somebody who's spent his working life on the West Coast, that is a bit of a closed circle. And I sometimes get the feeling as though those folks kind of feed each other and live off each other and deal mostly with each other rather than ordinary people. That's a judgment I cannot really defend because I just get that feeling from listening to some of the output. Here's an example of a review of the kind of reception that this book received. In the Atlantic magazine, The Atlantic, on August 10th, 2011, the magazine printed a book of the 10, an article, and a list, the 10 best books. And number 7 on that list was The Influencing Machine. It said of this book, one of the coolest and most charming book releases of this year. The coolest and the most charming. The Influencing Machine is a graphic novel about the media. I beg to differ. It's really not a novel at all. I mean, we're familiar with novels. They tell a story, usually a fictional one. The graphic novels that I'm familiar with they happen to be Tintin books. When my sons were little, they loved Tintin. Although, of course, written by a Belgian named Hergé, they're really Tintin books, not Tintin books. But in any case, they are lovely books. They are well illustrated. They feature a great little dog named Snowy, and they feature, of course, Tintin, the young reporter who has adventures all over the world, in Egypt and South America, all of in the United States, everywhere. This is turning into a review of Tintin. If you haven't looked at Tintin books for a long time, I invite you to look them up. They probably have some in the library, and if not, you can get them from Amazon, I'm sure. And they are just a delight. And unlike The Influencing Machine, the Tintin books are graphic novels. So, in any case, the reviewer here claims that this is a graphic novel about the media, its history, and its many maladies. Note the pronoun here, its. Its? What are you talking about? Its. Media is plural. It is one of the things that I have been campaigning about for probably the last 30 years, ever since the word media became common, came into use. Medium is the plural. That's the its. Media is the plural. And we're talking about many different kinds of things here. It's not an it. You're getting maybe the idea of what I think of this review. This is not really a review. It's just a little blurb about this book in the Atlantic magazine. And the writer says that if you want to know, if you want to get an impression of what this book is like, think the information meets the medium as the message meets everything explained through flowcharts. I hate to tell you this, but that didn't mean anything to me. If those are said to be titles of something or other, but I'm not familiar with them. In any case, it says here that the Influencing Machine takes a refreshingly alternative approach to the age-old issue of why we disparage and distrust the news. And as the book quickly makes clear, it has always been thus. Well, it may have always been thus, but I can remember a time when we had at least some amount of trust in what now is, usually referred to as the media. And I don't remember that much, but I remember the last 50 years, and Walter Cronkite, be trusted. And when we read the San Bernardino Sun, we trusted what was in there, more or less, unless we knew different. But most of the time, we didn't know different. And in any case, that was an era, I believe, I'm talking about the 60s here, the late 60s, 70s, and so on, that where the media, especially newspapers and television network news, did enjoy the confidence of the majority of its audience, which evidently is no longer the case, at least according to the Influencing Machine. Now let me get to the book itself. To give you a taste of what the pages look like, here's, if this works, is what this looks like. You can't read the text probably, but the point here is the author starts by talking about the history of how information is disseminated. She talks about on these pages about, for example, in ancient, the Mayans in Guatemala, who appointed scribes who were, transmitting whatever the rulers of the society want to transmit it, unless, and as the point is made on the lower left-hand side there, and when the scribes came into disrepute, they were usually tortured and eviscerated, which I think is what some of us would like to do with the people bringing us the news today. She makes the point here in the other panels that in ancient Rome, the beginning of news dissemination took place, which I never heard of. I took Latin for 13 years in school, and I have never heard of anybody claiming that news distribution was an invention of the Romans in this case. But she says that Julius Caesar, after somehow during this short reign as the Caesar of Rome, got the Senate transactions to be transcribed and sent around the empire in something that she calls the Acta Diurna. If that was news to me, and it is the sort of thing that illustrates one of the aspects of this book. The author has done exhaustive research. The bibliography alone is several pages long. And she presents her research about how information is transmitted, how it is made public, and so on in these little panels. And each panel has a little fact or a factoid that is worth knowing if you care about that. And assuming readers of this book do care about that. So that is very, and this is the style. Let me take a look at another one here. This is the other, the previous thing that you saw was how most of the pages are built, and this is where she makes general points that the illustrator apparently had trouble illustrating with panels and bubbles, and so she went with this. The point here is, well, I don't know if you can read this, but she's showing the Empire State Building as something that is a structure that is able to sway in the wind, which is why it does not break. And she contrasts that on the previous page with other kinds of systems, and she likens this to the freedom of speech that we enjoy. Different kinds of winds of opinion all over the place, and that's how our society somehow survives, unlike and flourishes, unlike some other systems that are rigid, where everything is controlled, where you can't have any different opinions in societies that generally sooner or later fail. Pretty good point, and the Empire State Building is supposed to illustrate it. She launches here. Those flags represent, stages in U.S. history, and the page serves as an introduction to her dissertation about how information in the United States was suppressed for many years, contrary to the points you just made about being free and all that. She makes the point, for example, that the United States is exceptional largely because of the First Amendment, the freedom of speech guarantee, and the case of John Peter Zenger back in the 1700s, who was accused of libel still in colonial times, was accused of libel, and whose case overturned the principle that the greater the truth of something, if it is libelous, the bigger the libel, the worse the punishment is going to be. The John Peter Zenger case established the fact that if you libel somebody, that is, make derogatory comments about somebody, the only the only defense against that is that it is true. Previous to that, the opposite was the case. The more true it was, the truer something was that was bad that you said about somebody, the worse you were going to get punished. And this principle, overturning that principle, helped make the United States, the early United States, exceptional in everybody's eyes, along with the First Amendment. But then she makes the point that over many periods of time after the First Amendment was passed, starting in fact in the 1790s when the Alien and Sedition Acts were passed during the Adams administration, speech started to be punished in the United States. Jumping way ahead, and just to give you a taste of, again, the kind of illustration that the kind of approach that the thing takes, I think, and this I think is a bit of a shortcoming of the book, I think this fellow looks a little bit like Walter Cronkite and is supposed to be Cronkite. Somehow, I recognize Nixon, but I don't think he exactly comes very close. So, and Johnson, I guess, is fairly close. But in any case, the illustrator here is sort of a hit and miss kind of a thing. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. We've been going on for almost half an hour, and so far I have not anybody challenged me. I urge you to not let me go on here like this. Let's see. My point about illustrating. Now that is supposed to be our president now. Does that come close? It doesn't to me. I'm sorry. I just don't get it. You will see on the second page of this panel a rendition of Brooke Gladstone. Now, she appears in that way throughout the book, and I wondered, why is she appearing that often? Turns out that, I try to count, and after the first 2 or 3 pages, I lost count at 20-something. There are 150-some pages in the book, and she appears on every one of them, nearly every one of them, several times. So you can get an idea of how often she appears. One of the things she makes the point about is that she thinks that talking to her audience in this form, in a picture book, is like radio, and she's familiar with radio. Now, I hate to say it, but somehow it just doesn't make sense to me. But because she has herself talking in bubbles, she thinks of herself as talking directly to her audience as though she were on the radio. Now, and you can see, does that look, do you feel like you're being spoken to on the radio? It didn't to me. It's one of the conceits, maybe not the most important one, about this book that I found that at least questionable. The right-hand page here begins a section of her book in which she is critical of a newspaper, of journalists in general. And she titles it, journalistic dogs, based on what she has Arthur Schopenhauer saying in the first panel, which is that journalists are like dogs. Whenever anything moves, they begin to bark. And, that is a complaint about journalists in general that is common. One of the worst things about journalism that I find these days is that whenever celebrities or big-time politicians make an appearance, a whole horde of people, congregate and try to get some comment from him. It seems to me that that one guy could do that and everybody else could listen, and it would be the same thing. I don't understand this horde of people. All my years in newspapers, whenever there was a press conference, I used to try to stay away, mostly because I don't want to know what everybody else knows. I want to know what I can find out. And she is absolutely right in her criticism of journalists as they conduct themselves, especially when big-time stories like this, big-time stories happen. I'm sorry you can't. Well, you can't. Obviously, you can't read the text here, and that's not the point. The point here is to just give you an idea of what the book looks like. And yes.
Is there any substantive criticism of journalism and journalists that you can point to that she makes?
There is, and I can't point to it here, but there is in the book. But the criticism is really muted, I think. And I get to her main point in a bit, which is, and the main point, let me back up a second. Her point about the influencing machine was that she believes, she uses that as a metaphor based on historical happenings back in the 1700s or even earlier. Well, no, right around then. And some people in England believed that they were being manipulated by some outside machine. As soon as electricity had come in, somebody claimed in a celebrated case that she was being manipulated by some outside machine that was electrifying her brain somehow, and that she was of course declared insane. But the idea was that this is a common perception by people, that they are influenced by some sort of outside influence that is nefarious and needs to be controlled and is generally just bad for everybody. Well, to jump to the point here, her point is that there is no such machine, which not exactly news to anybody if you think about it. There is no such machine. That whatever failings the media have, whatever failings journalists suffer from, are exactly the same failings that originate in all of us. She believes that the media are exactly a mirror of the people, of the consuming audience. So whatever we want the media do. Notice I said do and not does. Whatever we fear, the media fear. Whatever we find interesting and fascinating and titillating, the media concentrate on. And so if there is any failing in the media, it is to pay attention to their audience. Now, the trouble is that if you don't pay attention to the audience, and the author freely admits this, you're out of business. That's the whole point of mass distribution media. And so that is her main point. And you can read all 50-some pages, or you can just take my word for it that is the deal. And you can save yourself the trouble. Now, I want to say something about what I found to be extremely hard reading. And when you read something, you consume typography. Now, it turns out that since Gutenberg, typography has had a vast amount of study. The shape of the letters, the length of the line, the spacing of the lettering between the lines, the size of the letters themselves, and the relationship between capitals and smaller and lowercase letters. All those things have something to do with how easy it is to read something. As somebody who, like you, for a lifetime has read, books that are based on principles of typography, I found this book to be extremely hard to read. The type is hand lettered. It's not scientifically, it's not designed at all. And every panel has a different idea. And they don't necessarily, I mean, they sort of follow, but not the way a sentence follows another sentence. So as an old-fashioned guy who has read all his life, I found this sort of book extremely hard to read, especially because there is no storyline. I mean, there's nothing that, there's nothing that builds suspense, that makes you turn the page, that so on. I mean, this is not a, I made the point, not a novel. It just doesn't have any continuity. According to one of the reviewers, this is supposed to be a manifesto. A manifesto? But that's kind of the way it reads. It's just a statement of one principle after another. And and the typography and the combination of the typography and the artwork made it, to me, hard reading. I read it once, then I had to take a couple of weeks, I had to take some break, I had to go overseas, and then I tried to think of what does this book, I couldn't remember any of it. So I had to read it again, which, and I did, but so that is the bit about typography, and in this case, journalists as a pack of dogs or birds on a wire. Same principle. That is that if, birds on a bunch of birds sitting on a wire, one of them flies off, everybody takes off. Same with reporters. I mean, they kind of run after each other sometimes. But once again, in the middle of that second page, do you recognize that guy? No, you do from the type or the legend. But he doesn't look anything like Bill O'Reilly to me. I mean, if you're, it seems, I mean, I hate to be so critical, but if you're going to be a renowned illustrator and cartoonist, you could probably come up with a better likeness of Bill O'Reilly. But so the point here is the same as before, being part of a herd, reporters are. And here's another point that she makes, that is, and this is an extremely good one. The one on the right, it talks about the Goldilocks number. Her specific example is that in a particular case, there were, the news reports were going around that 50,000 kids were being abducted every year in the United States, and we had to do something about it. Milk cartons and all that. 50,000. Somebody looked into where does this number come from? 50,000. Well, they started looking through crime reports and all this kind of stuff, and they came up with, 500 or thereabouts. And most of those were by other parents. I mean, non-custodial parents. And so they dug into this, reporters did. They dug into this a bit more. Not general level reporters, but people particularly, the one or two people particularly interested in this case. And, a fellow named Chris Hansen works for Dateline, or did at the time. Looked into this number and found that it was just plain phony, but it had the semblance of truth. It was just right, the way Goldilocks found things just right. It wasn't to 500,000. That would have been unbelievable. Nobody would have believed that. It wasn't 50, because surely in a big country of 300 million people, it's got to be more than that. So somehow this number of 50,000 got settled in the popular literature as being the number of people being abducted. And it turns out that the number 50,000 has also been used in other contexts. If I could read this, I can't, but in several other contexts where 50,000 somehow was used and then repeated at many times in that context and others. And the point here is that nobody checked to see if it was really true. And you find that in so many things that what happens is that somebody writes a paper, a scientific paper, and estimates something. Oh, it must be around 50,000. That gets written up in a story. Somebody else does another report on the thing, looks it up, oh, 50,000, uses the number. And it spreads that way. And it simply is not necessarily true. Brooke uses the point to illustrate how careless we sometimes are with numbers and how it pays to look into them at greater depth. One of her observations is that newspapers in general, that newspeople, journalists in general, refuse to commit themselves. They ask somebody something, he tells them something, they repeat it, then they ask somebody else because they think it needs another side, and the other guy says something else, and they just say, well, that guy says, and the other guy says, there you are. And of course, the reader has no idea who is telling the truth. She calls this behavior the great refusal. That is, the refusal to commit yourself, the refusal to take sides, the refusal to actually try to find the truth, and the refusal to do the hard work and simply take everybody's word for what's going on. And the reference comes from Dante's Inferno, where apparently the deepest pits of hell, where the fires burn the hottest, are reserved for people who refuse to commit themselves, refuse to take a side. Now, what she wants you to do is, and this plays into her idea of bias. What she really would like you to do is, like reporters to do, is to find out the truth. But she touches in that connection on the topic of bias. Almost everybody here will probably think that parts of the news media are biased in some way. And the general presumption is that the bias is political, that it's mostly on the liberal side. And she asserts that that simply is not true. She admits that when in polls and in other ways, most news people identify themselves on the liberal side of politics. But she asserts, and I believe she is right on that, that does not necessarily govern exactly what they do. It does, however, influence the choices they make and what they cover, I think. But there's really nothing you can do about that. Every one of us has certain preconceptions. Everyone has certain biases. Otherwise, how would you even approach even a simple story like reporting on a city council meeting? You have to figure out, first of all, what's important. What are you going to write about? What do you bring to that decision? The only thing you can bring to that decision is your own background, what you know, what you think is important. Otherwise, you'd have to say, well, the city council meeting started at 7:30. The room was lighted with 17 lights. The walls were white, mostly. Some of the council members wore shoes, and most of them wore ties. You know, stuff like that. And you would think, well, that's objective reporting. That's taking a picture of what's going on. But no, you don't do that. You don't waste your time doing that. You wait for what you think is important, and then you report that. That is one form of bias. But there are other biases, and she talks about it here. And you can't get around it. I mean, you just have to know it's there. Media survive in commerce. They need to get paid. They need to pay their people. They want to make a profit. If they don't make a profit, they go out of business, and that's all there is to it. Now, so that is something you got to keep in mind. Does it matter to the news coverage? No, not necessarily. The newspapers locally here published a few days ago their statement of ownership. I don't know if you looked at it. It's in tiny little type, although the ad is pretty big, but the ad is tiny, really tiny. But you see, the owners are about 20 or 30 banks and lending houses and commercial, some of them in China and some of them in Europe, most of them in New York and Washington and Delaware. But anyway, a whole bunch of banks. Well, does that mean anything to news coverage? No, it doesn't. But that's the background. I mean, that's the ownership of it. And once you're aware of it, you just keep that in mind when you read the stories. And if there is some kind of bias toward that, you can account for that or compensate. There is the bias well, she calls it the status quo bias, and that is that, you know, we expect things to be the way they are, and on the other hand, if something happens that is different from the way they are, that is what makes news. So that is something, and there's the access bias. If you can't get to anybody to talk to you, you can't write about what they say or what they know or what is going on. So it is very important for people, especially in politics, especially in Washington politics, to have access to people who make decisions. And if they don't like what you write, they can cut you off. So it is very important to keep that in mind, that what is reported is what the people who grant access want to be reported. Other stuff sometimes does not get mentioned. And there is, of course, now in this age, the visual bias. That is, if you can take a picture of it, you're better off. She makes a point about wartime suppression of news and how that sometimes affects history in a big way. On the panel on the right, she has General Hindenburg as the German president in the Weimar Republic, telling a reporter for the New York Times, I think, telling a reporter that he thought that the First World War, that Germany lost the First World War when the Americans went into action at the Argonne Forest. General Pershing of the Allied forces, the reporter had snuck into occupied Germany, or not occupied, but Germany against military orders, and General Pershing ordered this interview to be suppressed. Had it been known, the whole world would have known what the commander of the German armies during the First World War and the president of the Republic after that felt had decided the war. That would have been very useful. Instead, what the world and what especially the Germans heard was in that panel below that there was some kind of a stab in the back from internal forces, finance, Jewish, that kind of stuff. That, as you know, determined the rest of the 20th century, and it caused an immense amount of suffering. Hundreds of millions of people killed. All of it possibly could be blamed on the suppression of that interview, which would have spread across the world like wildfire. Like the German, chief guy saying, "Look, the reason we lost is the Americans beat the hell out of us. That's it." But that's not what happened, and so we know what the result was in history. She makes some points about the Iraq War. She goes on at some length about war, and notices that, or points out that a different kind of censorship took place during the recent Iraq War, and that is that the generals decided early on that they might get better press if the reporters were embedded with the forces. But again, when they were embedded, that's all they could report. They didn't see all the stuff where the troops did not lead them. And one of her NPR colleagues there on the lower panel expresses his disappointment, I guess, with the way this went. He's very hopeful about access and so on when it started, and not so enchanted with the process when it was over. Well, the whole point of objectivity gets a good treatment in this book, and it is worth. It makes good points. During the 30s, objectivity was not present in American newspapers during the early part of the 20th century, up till about the First World War. In the 30s and the 40s and 50s, the idea of the impersonal reporter began. And so bylines were hidden, or were hardly any. The idea was that it was possible somehow to report in a completely objective way, Just the facts, ma'am, nothing else, no impressions, no nothing. It was a fallacy, I think, because, as I said earlier, people approach stories with a certain mindset. And it is best now, and it is the trend now, to explore or to disclose those backgrounds whenever possible. Somebody, she quotes in the right-hand page there, says that news is kind of like the donut hole. That in the middle is everything that everybody believes, and people write about that and nobody complains. The donut itself is the area where there's controversy and there's a lot of news reporting going on. And anything outside the donut is so out there that nobody even dares mention it. And there's something to that. I mean, it's the herd instinct, you know. We don't try to go too far out because we don't know. We don't want to get too far ahead of the audience. Finally, in The Matrix in Me, in this chapter, she talks about the future of news media, and that is truly frightening. She takes account of research that shows that that information technology is getting ever more miniaturized, and that there's some research suggesting that by 2045 or thereabouts, that we will have devices implanted in us so that we don't even have devices to worry about anymore. We are just constantly plugged in. And in fact, there is just some research now about that outside of this book that talks about the same thing. You know, the increasing wiredness, or not wired, wirelessness of people becoming computers and then being totally at the mercy of what the online world impinges or imprints on us. Now that, to me, is truly frightening. And I would think she talks about it here in this final chapter, where she considers herself and people to be becoming robot-like, and so on. In the book herself, though, she ends on a hopeful note, which I wonder about. After going through all this, all these shortcomings, all these problems, this long history of failings, of failing to present the world as it is, and failing to be truthful and all that, she says on the final page that I'm Brooke Gladstone and I'm a reporter. I am generally a dark individual, but I think this is a great time to be alive. Robots, implanted stuff, great time to be alive. Our limits are purely human, she says. Our enemies are not the digital bits that dance across our screens, but the neural impulses that animate our lizard brains. So she's hopeful. Good for you, Brooke. I'm not that hopeful, not just in connection with the media, but in general, but in connection with the human race and what we do. There was a story in the Week magazine which summarizes the week's news. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it, but it has to do with research going on prolonging human life. And my God, they are getting close. They prolonged the life of a mouse ad infinitum. They've made little organs, little artificial hearts out of other stuff. And they think they can now make organs by 3D printing. So that, and these people are serious, and they're spending money, and they're getting results. So that they think people could maybe live for 100, 200, 300 years. And if they get old, after 300 years, you go and you get a new heart, you get a bunch of new stuff, and you live another 100 years. I mean, I can't think of a more frightening prospect than that, but Brooke is pretty optimistic. And I don't know where she gets her optimism, but I guess it's helpful to be in the news business to be optimistic, when you look at newspapers generally, you're thinking it's like that in terms of economic viability. But you know, I got to tell you, not all of them. The other day, I had to go to Germany for a funeral, and I picked up a paper. Well, I picked up one paper. It's the Daily Telegraph from London, and it's a Monday, pretty thick. And now at the airport, they charge 350 euros. That's about $5. So maybe that's the answer. You get. Here's a national paper from Germany, and it's also a Monday. And man, you look at that, you got section after section after section, and some ad inserts, but other, you know, stuff like that. And they charge, just generally, 220 euros, and that's about $3, for the Monday paper. But people buy it. Why do they buy it? Because it is a full newspaper. It is thick. It's got stuff in it. It doesn't, you know, waste a whole lot of space on big, huge headlines. It is graphically different, but to me, it's graphically pretty exciting. It's just clean, and it pays attention to its typography, and it pays attention to the kind of people who write for it, and so on. Well, that to me would inspire some optimism, but I haven't seen us doing that kind of stuff. We do the opposite. You know, things get tight in the economy, we cut the paper down. It's like, and we make it smaller and smaller. So that is Brooke Gladstone on the influencing machine, and I commend the book to you because it gives you an idea of what can be done. Whether it's to your taste or not, I don't know. It wasn't exactly to mine. I would have preferred it to be a written book rather than. But that is it. And there was a question. Yes.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing in this country. For example, today's New York Times is very thick. It's got a lot of different sections in it. At the same time, we're seeing the Oregonian go to a different way of distributing news. And I'm wondering on your views on what we can see in the future. Will we end up with only a few major newspapers and the smaller ones will disappear?
That, unfortunately, is what I see. The smaller ones eventually disappearing. Now, they say they're not disappearing. They say they're going online. To me, that's the same thing as disappearing. I mean, I don't know if you've looked at the Oregonian's website lately. It is pretty lively. I mean, it's a bunch of stuff. But it's just not the same. And the stories on there have to be shorter because you can't look at a screen all that long. And it seems to me as though they don't take as much work to prepare. I mean, not as much reporting, certainly not as much, I don't know, but I shouldn't say that because I really don't know how the Oregonian operates. I know that Chris Anderson, the publisher, I know him, he's a good guy. I mean, he wants to do the right thing. But he is under tremendous economic pressure. His company is a corporation. It's a family-owned corporation, but it's got a whole bunch of family members who all have demands, I suppose. Other companies are other corporations that have, that have stockholders, for one thing, who have seen their stock die in value, and who have taken on debt that they have to repay somehow, or go out of business. And so the only choice they believe they have, the only choice they have, is to keep shrinking what they do. I think as a business model, shrinking what you do, giving people less and charging them more, is not going to work forever. I mean, that's just me, but that's what it seems to me. So what some of us have done is done something else because the newspaper business left us. I got it. I've been gone from newspapering for a year, but because I was used to writing something every day, I keep doing that. And I put it on my website, which is hhtoday.com. In this case, it's a commentary about, prompted by the government shutdown and the impasse in Washington. But it also has other kind of stuff that just more or less lighthearted commentary about local things that I see. Here are these rumor-inducing refrigeration cars that are parked out on a siding outside of Lebanon, have been for a long time. On Facebook, somebody thought it had something to do with the United Nations. I mean, it's either white refrigeration cars or black helicopters, one or the other, or maybe both. And I wanted to explain what that was all about. Somehow I got it about rail cars. I saw this rail car, and I wondered what was going on, what it was all about. And I found out what it was all about and explained it to people who also may have wondered about the same thing. And I've been interested for a number of years, for a time, about the development of the Lucky Mute River, the Lucky Mute Natural Area. I have a canoe, and I keep waiting to use it on the Lucky Mute River. And the State Parks Department promised they were going to put in this paddler's access. In fact, they have a parking lot, they have a restroom, they have signs on Buena Vista Road, paddler's access. But there ain't no access. It's just brambles like this. You can't get there. Well, it turns out that the Parks Department didn't get around to doing that because there's a window. There's a window that protects fish. You have to be able to do your construction during a particular time, and they missed it, so they can't do it until next fall, which means I can't use my canoe until 2015. I'm not sure I'm going to be around that long. So anyway, I talked about what that's all about, and report on the site from almost just about every day about stuff that I see, and then people, as in this case, get a chance to comment on it. And I'm not the newspaper, and I don't rival the newspaper, but I'm getting a pretty good traffic. People do look at it, and sometimes they react to it, and sometimes they learn something here that they didn't know before. So that's it. Even though you did not challenge me, oh, wait a second.
I just have a question, I'll talk loud. I like that, I'm going to go read it, but it seems like you're mixing opinion, editorial, and reporting, and it seems that this is what is happening in media today, which is confusing people?
That is an excellent point, which is why the site is called News and Commentary. Now, I think for most people it is not that hard to differentiate between what is reported as a fact is in this one case, well, the paddler's access is not going to be built this year. That's what the Parks Department said. That's not opinion. That's just, and but then I have some opinion about that in the same piece. I think most of the readers of this place are extremely intelligent, and they can tell the difference between opinion, and they're not too confused, I hope. But it is a good point. Yes?
It bothers you that media is singular. It bothers me 150% because 100% is all there is.
Right. Okay. Well, now that I have shamelessly promoted this website to you, I think we're just about, it's 1:05. I have a hunch that there's a meter patrol person that